Most people think being a dictator's wife means designer clothes, golden palaces, and unlimited power. They are completely wrong. The women married to Saddam Hussein didn't live like queens. They lived like prisoners, surrounded by luxury they couldn't enjoy, protected by guards who answered to someone else, and trapped inside a system designed to crush anyone who stepped out of line, including them. This is not a story about power. This is a story about what happens when you are closest to a monster, and how that destroys you just as surely as being his enemy. If you're new here, welcome to Army Story, where we dig into the darkest corners of the past that most channels won't touch. Hit subscribe right now because this story gets significantly darker before it's over. Let's get into it. Fish Part 1. The Girl Who Had No Choice. Sajida Khairallah. Talfa never chose Saddam Hussein. She was chosen for him, before she was old enough to understand what marriage even meant. Born in 1937 into a conservative Sunni family rooted deep in Iraqi tribal culture, Sajida grew up in a world where girls weren't raised to have opinions. They were raised to obey. Education wasn't a priority. Independence wasn't discussed. Your life was decided by the men around you, and you accepted it quietly or faced the consequences. Her fate was sealed in childhood. Her family promised her to her cousin Saddam Hussein while they were both still kids. This was completely normal in their community. Tribal families kept power and bloodlines locked together through arranged marriages. Sajida had no say. Refusing simply wasn't an option that existed. Now, meanwhile, Saddam was becoming something terrifying. His early life read like a warning no one bothered to act on. His father died before he was born. His mother reportedly rejected him. He was raised by relatives who used violence as casually as conversation. By the time he was a teenager, he was already drawn to intimidation and aggression. He idolized strong men, joined street fights, and eventually embedded himself inside the Ba'ath Party, a political organization that treated brutality as a tool of governance. When Sajida formally married him in 1963, she was 26 years old. Saddam was 26. On paper, they were equals. In reality, she was marrying a man who had already participated in political assassinations. And things got worse almost immediately. That same year, the Ba'ath Party seized power in Iraq and launched a violent purge. Mass arrests, executions, and forced disappearances. When the government collapsed months later, Saddam became a hunted man. He was captured, beaten in prison, and in 1966 he escaped and vanished underground. Sajida went with him. Part 2, Living Inside the Nightmare. Forget the image of a powerful first lady. For years, Sajida lived as a fugitive. She moved from house to house. She slept in relatives' homes, borrowed safe locations, temporary rooms. She couldn't use her real name. She couldn't trust neighbors. Every stranger was a potential informant. Every knock at the door could mean the end. She gave birth to their first son, Uday, in 1964, while they were hiding. She gave birth to Qusay in 1966, while they were still hiding. And imagine delivering children in those conditions. No stability, no security, constantly rehearsing cover stories and managing fear around the clock, every single day. When the Ba'ath Party finally seized permanent power in July 1968, Saddam stepped out of the shadows and into the machinery of the state. He placed himself in charge of intelligence services, internal security, and the secret police. These agencies arrested people in the middle of the night, tortured them in facilities that didn't officially exist, and executed them without trials. Sajida moved into the presidential palaces, and it wasn't better. It was different, and in many ways, worse. The palaces looked like luxury from the outside. Inside, they functioned like surveillance facilities. Servants were rotated constantly, so no one became too comfortable or heard too much. Staff members vanished without explanation. Guards answered only to Saddam. Sajida had no authority over anyone in her own home. She didn't choose her visitors. She didn't choose her schedule. She couldn't have a private conversation without knowing it might be overheard and reported. Saddam treated his household exactly the way he treated the country, with systematic suspicion and zero tolerance for anything that threatened his control. When Saddam declared himself president of Iraq in July 1979, and Sajida officially became First Lady, she received exactly none of the influence that title implies. She wasn't allowed at major political events. She gave no speeches. She made no public appearances. Saddam deliberately kept her invisible. A visible wife, he believed, was a vulnerability. He wanted no questions asked about his personal life. She was first lady in name only. In practice, she was a secret. Part 3, the second wife and the slow humiliation. Then came Samira Shabandar. During the Iran-Iraq War, a catastrophic 8-year conflict that Saddam launched in 1980 and that killed more than 500,000 people, Saddam quietly married a second wife. Samira was younger, from a wealthy Baghdad family, and she was clearly the priority now. The shift inside the household was immediate and devastating. Sajida was pushed aside, excluded from gatherings, removed from daily routines, frozen out of any remaining role she had. She had stood beside this man before he had power. She had lived in hiding with him. She had raised his children through years of danger and fear. And now, in the middle of a war he had started, which she was simply moved to the side like furniture that no longer matched the room. She had absolutely no way to fight back. Protesting meant punishment. Complaining meant being seen as disloyal. The same system that terrorized millions of Iraqis also kept his own wife completely trapped. And her children? They were becoming monsters. Hussein grew into one of the most feared and sadistic men in Iraq. He abused women systematically, using his father's name as a shield. He took control of sports organizations and tortured athletes who underperformed. He murdered people at social gatherings and faced zero legal consequences because of who his father was. Qusay was quieter, colder, and in many ways more dangerous. Saddam trusted him with elite military units and internal security operations. Qusay conducted arrests and executions with precision. He had learned from the master. Sajida watched this happen. She had no power to stop it. Intervening with Saddam would have been treated as criticism, and criticism was betrayal. Her sons were beyond her reach, swallowed whole by the system their father built. Part 4, the betrayal that broke everything. In August 1995, something happened that nobody expected. Two of Saddam's sons-in-law, Hussein Kamel and Saddam Kamel, defected to Jordan. These weren't minor officials. These were men inside Saddam's innermost circle, trusted with classified weapons information and military secrets. They fled with their families, held press conferences, and told the world what they knew. Saddam was publicly humiliated for the first time. But here's where it becomes genuinely chilling. Instead of responding with immediate violence, Saddam played a long game. Over several months, he sent messages through family members, quiet promises of safety, forgiveness, and restored honor. He made the appeal feel personal and believable because it came through relatives they trusted. In February 1996, the brothers came back. Within days, Saddam stripped away their protection. They were isolated, surrounded, and killed in what the regime called a tribal revenge attack. Before the murders, Saddam forced his own daughters, Ragad and Rana, to publicly divorce their husbands. He made them erase their marriages before having their husbands executed. His daughters didn't get a choice. His daughters didn't get a goodbye. Sajida watched all of this happen. Her daughters lost their husbands in the most brutal and calculated way imaginable. She couldn't comfort them. She couldn't speak out. The grief had to stay locked inside because anything else was dangerous. After that moment, Sajida essentially ceased to exist within Saddam's world. She was rarely seen, never acknowledged publicly, and completely cut off from whatever remained of her former life. Part 5, the collapse and the silence after. When the U.S.-led invasion began in March 2003, Saddam Hussein made his escape plans for exactly one person, himself. No evacuation routes were arranged for Sajida, no security guarantees, no instructions. When the regime collapsed, she was simply left behind inside a disintegrating state. Guards abandoned their posts, communication systems went dead. The infrastructure of terror that had controlled every hour of her life for decades just stopped functioning overnight. Baghdad fell in April 2003. Statues came down. Government buildings were looted, and Saddam's wives became targets. Not because they held power, but because their names made them symbols of everything ordinary Iraqis had suffered through. In July 2003, Uday and Qusay were killed in a firefight with U.S. forces in Mosul. Sajida lost both sons on the same day. In December 2003, Saddam was found hiding alone in an underground hole near Tikrit. In December 2006, he was executed. Sajida lived out her remaining years quietly. Moving between countries, her location kept hidden, her name still too dangerous to carry openly. She had spent her entire life beside one of history's most brutal dictators. Well, she had survived prison escapes, wars, purges, palace surveillance, and the systematic destruction of her own family. She died on January 9, 2015. She was 77 years old. There were no crowds, no ceremonies, no headlines, just silence. The same silence she had been forced to keep her entire life. Here's what makes this story genuinely haunting. Sajida wasn't powerful. She wasn't protected. She wasn't living some privileged parallel life while Iraq suffered. She was caught inside the same machine as everyone else, just closer to the man operating it. Proximity to a monster doesn't make you safe. Sometimes it makes you the most trapped person in the room. That's the part of history that never makes it into the headlines. In the human wreckage left behind, not just from wars and invasions, but from simply being connected to someone who treated power as the only thing that mattered. If this video hit differently than you expected, that's the point. History isn't just dates and battles, it's people. And sometimes the people closest to the story are the ones nobody talks about. Drop a comment below. What shocked you most about this? I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed to Army Story yet, fix that right now. New episodes drop regularly, and we're just getting started on stories like this one. See you in the next one.